Namaste Indian webmasters and welcome to Ask Search Quality, the first of its kind social media campaign that we are doing for the Indian webmaster community. We asked you guys for your questions and we got an amazing response from you guys. Don't you think so, Ashish?
I totally agree. It's been quite overwhelming actually. I think the kind of questions we've been asked have been quite amazing. They're very specific to the Indian market. We know what the webmasters want, and I think we're really looking forward to answering them.
Okay, so how we are going to start about this?
So what we're going to do is we've got questions on various different topics. So we'll try and club them together based on the similarity in topics, and also a lot of webmasters have voted for the questions that they want answered. So we'll kind of start off with that, and we'll boil down to the remaining as time goes.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. So let's get started with our first question. So the first question comes from Ramesh, who is from Delhi, and he basically wants to know how does Google detect canonical URLs. He has a website where he's having some problems with dynamic parameters, filters and duplicate pages. And similar question is from Karan, who is from Chandigarh, and he has an e-commerce website and he wants to know basically how should he handle dynamic canonical tags. So how would you answer that question?
I think, thank you Ramesh and Karan first for the questions. And Ramesh, Karan, you guys aren't the only webmasters who are facing this problem, because I think this is a very common problem that a lot of webmasters seem to be facing, especially those who are working with really large websites, with e-commerce websites with a lot of categories, filters. So it does happen that a website has multiple URLs which point to the same content, right? So how Google really identifies, what is the preferred URLs in a bunch of URLs pointing to the same content? So number one, Google kind of tries to do this algorithmically. So if you have not explicitly specified that there is a canonical URL, Google tries to identify which, amongst those list of URLs is the preferred URL. But as a webmaster, you have the control to actually tell Google what the canonical URL is. So, and you can do that in multiple ways, and I think that comes down to the second part of the question what Ramesh asked, where
about the e-commerce website.
About where to place the canonical tag, right? So I think there are multiple ways of doing this. There's no best way. There are multiple different ways. You can have a 301 redirect, you can have a sitemap, but one I think popular way of doing it is by putting it in the header section of your source code. What you can do is you can use the attribute href equals canonical under the link tag in your header section. I think that's a fairly straightforward thing to do. But what we'll do is we'll probably put a link in the description where we list out the different techniques in which they can be adding a canonical element to a page. But one thing to note when you're doing this is that you need to add this to every page. Suppose you've got 5 URLs of which one is the canonical URL, you've got to specify it in all the 5 pages which one is the canonical URL. So that's one thing that you should really remember.
So to summarize the entire thing, Google automatically detects the duplicate pages and tries to identify which page to go for, and if you're if you want more control over that, you can basically go into the source code or your HTML file and basically specify in your href tag in the header section which canonical URL should Google pick.
Absolutely, bang on.
Okay, so coming on to the next part of the question, where Karan has an e-commerce website and he seems to be having a problem with his dynamically generated URLs. I think there is a fairly common problem with e-commerce websites where they have a lot of products and a lot of categories and they use a lot of filters, and they have to sort of generate URLs on the go, like dynamically, and all of them sort of essentially point to the same content. So he sort of wants to know how does Google handle it, and if he wants to have more control over that, how does he deal with it?
Like you rightly said, e-commerce websites are huge, right? When you've got a website which has tens of thousands of products, it becomes impossible for a user to go through it manually. You cannot expect me to go through a website with 10,000 shoes if I want to buy one. So you will have to give me filters. You will, if I need to put stuff in my shopping cart, you would probably have to give me a personalized experience. You might have a session ID. So what happens when e-commerce websites do that is that each of these URL is basically considered as a duplicate URL because they are pointing to the same content. And I think that's what Karan is facing as well. So the best way I think that you can handle this is by using the URL parameters tool. It's a fairly straightforward tool, but it's super useful, and I think really essential if you have an e-commerce website.
Okay.
So what you can do here is open your webmaster tools. Or towards the left you've got under the crawl section you can click on the URL parameters tab, and once you go there you have various different options that you would see. So when you click on the edit button, so if you've already got parameters that you've added, you can see an edit button to the right. So you can click on the edit button next to the parameter you want to define for Google. If it isn't already listed, you can see an add parameter option on the top to create a new one, right? So you need to remember that this tool is case sensitive. So if you've got to be really careful about that. So assume you've got an affiliation program that you're running, right? And you want Google to basically ignore every URL with an affiliate ID. So what you could do is you can go and type in AFF ID under the section there. And now what you've got to choose is you've got to decide if this is an active if it's an active parameter or a passive parameter. Alright. So the basic difference, there's a very small difference between the two. So passive parameters are those which do not really alter the content of a page. For instance, if we're talking about the affiliate ID, right? It's just a tracking mechanism, but the content on the page is absolutely the same. So those are your passive parameters. But sometimes when you're talking about filters, right? When I'm restricting it by a brand, it's basically altering the content because it's showing me content very specific. So those are active parameters. So if you've got a passive parameter, you click on that, or whatever is your appropriate your website, you click on that information, and when for passive just select no, and all you got to do is press save. But if you're pressing active, you've got to also mention how that parameter is altering the content on the page, because it could be reordering it, it could be narrowing it down, it could be doing anything. Exactly. So you've got to exactly mention what happens with that active parameter. Alright, and once you do that, you have multiple options after that where you can choose, you can exactly tell Google how it needs to handle your parameters behavior. For instance, you can either let Googlebot decide, right? So if you're not sure of how your parameter behaves, or it changes based on different parts of your site, the parameter behaves differently, just let Googlebot analyze and take a decision. Or if you basically want to tell that, if you select the next option, which is every URL, what happens is that you're telling Google that these URLs with unique values of a specific parameter do not contain duplicate content. Right? So you're basically telling that consider every URL as a unique URL. Right? Or if you're saying that if you have a specific affiliate program which basically starts with an AFF ID equals XYZ, and you want to tell Google only to ignore these affiliate IDs, you can also mention that by using only URLs with a specified value. Or the other option is basically to tell Google to ignore all affiliate IDs or session IDs by selecting the final option, that is no URLs. So I think once you do this is really going to make life easier for you, and will allow you to deal better with dynamic parameters on e-commerce sites.
So to summarize what you just said, if you have a website with a lot of dynamically generated URLs, URL parameter tool is something that you should look at. It's a really powerful tool, and it will come to your rescue. Although be aware that it is case sensitive, and also if you end up committing some kind of a typo, you might just end up asking Googlebot not to crawl your website. So I think that's it from the first segment of Ask Search Quality. We'll see you next time.